and therefore became very important.
And this is the mother of?
That's the mother of Pharaoh Akhenaten, and some people also say the mother of King Tut, and the mother-in-law of Nefertiti. Again, these are Waset families. These are up-south families. Here's another up-south priestess, Anut Tawi, who is a priestess of ancient Kemet, but again, she's up-south. So if you notice that the center of power at this time is in the middle of the country, or in the part of the country least infiltrated by outside influences, less mixed racially, less mixed culturally. And that would be examples of what we've been talking about.
People are so used to seeing white Egyptians.
Right.
One must ask, where do these people come from?
Right. Well, see, those people have been there all the time. They're just not in the books. The books that show pictures of white Egyptians normally show pictures of the Egyptians, not the Kemites, and that means they're showing pictures of people who were ruling or who were in Egypt during the Greek and Roman times and after that. And so it's always important to date the picture and to know whether you're talking about royalty or not.
Okay.
There's virtually all creativities are indigenous, and the invasions are destructive. The Greco-Romans were imitative. So if I go back to the chart here, and let's take a look. Golden Age number 1, Golden Age number 2, invasion. This is the first invasion. This was a destructive invasion from Asia. They are not given the credit with building temples, with building pyramids, with building religion. They were very destructive. And then there is a return in Dynasty 18 and 19, which is the third Golden Age, and the Greco-Romans don't actually get to Kemet and begin to impose their name, Greece, and their culture and their political control until here. You see, the Greeks come in 332 BC, which is after all 4 Golden Ages, but they didn't destroy. They are the exception to the invasion being destructive. What they did was imitate. Now, the Romans that come in after the Greeks, beginning about 30 years before Christ, they're the ones that began to destroy again. And particularly, they destroyed the educational and religious institutions to the extent that they were able to do that over the course of 200 to 300 years.
Now, at that 332 BC, is that basically when you see the white?
Right. This is when you'll see large numbers of white. Well, you also see it here with the Persians in 525 BC. But then you're talking about large numbers of settlers here with the Greeks, Alexander the Great, and then the Caesars here with the Romans, and you had large numbers of people infiltrating into Alexandria and around Cairo. Generally, they didn't go very far up south, but nevertheless, some did. And it's not until you get the Arabic population that you begin to get that large infusion of foreigners up south. Okay, this is part of the literature during the period of the, in fact, this dates all the way back to the beginning of Kemetic times.
But that this was in place.
This would be in place, and it's part of the culture all the way through, and it's an example of what people destroyed. You know, the invaders were destructive rather than creative. They didn't create this religion, it was already in place.
And the Egyptian Book of the Dead deals with what?
The Egyptian Book of the Dead is really much like the first 5 books of Moses or the Pentateuch in the Old Testament. It deals with the creation. It deals with, some people say they're spells, you know, but you have to really get into the study of Kemetic religion to understand that these things are part of a very deep symbolic studies that you don't just talk about. You have to go through a training process in order to understand them. Yeah.
Okay.
This is an example of the Immaculate Conception of with the god Horus, god Osiris lying down on his back, and you'll see the goddess Isis, who is hovering above him with his erect penis, and that is the actual Immaculate Conception in stone, and this is at the Temple of Abydos, and that's a story, of course, that we'll pick up in Christianity, and that was already created by Africans long before it appeared in anybody else's religion. Here's an example of the imitation. You know, all of these are examples of imitation. The Book of the Dead was imitated in the religious literature of other people. The creation story was imitated. Here's the imitation with a God giving life to now a Greek pharaoh. This Greek pharaoh this is outside the temple of Horus at Edfu, which is a reconstructed temple under the authority of the Greeks. With their money, when they took over, they followed the desires of the priests, and they began to reconstruct. That's imitation. This is after Alexander the Great. And this is Alexander the Great here, or at least one of the statues of Alexander the Great. And you can see how different this is.
Who goes into Egypt?
He goes into Egypt and is in fact welcomed by the Kemetic people of the time as the deliverer from the Persians. They were happy to see him come. And generally speaking, you could say the Greeks were fairly respectful of the Kemetic people, but they were basically imitators of the Kemetic people.
So when the Greeks went in there, the Africans were already out of control?
Yes, they had already lost control to the Persians, and they never regained control again after that.
Okay, master key number 8.
Master key number 8 is that if you want to understand the thinking of Kemet, you must think in terms of symbolic thought and metaphorical thought. If you take things literally, you'll be mistaken. So that if you think that just because you see a God that has a man's body and an animal's head, for example, that this is animal worship, you will be missing the entire point, because there's much more to it than that. And so here we have examples of the use of things like, well, look at Khepera there, for example, the beetle. You know, comes from a study of biology. So they noticed that this beetle, the dung beetle, a particular beetle, would bury its eggs and then would bury them in the sand, and then as the sun came out, it would heat, and then all of a sudden these eggs would break open. And so they associated that with birth and creativity and creation. And so the Khepera then becomes the God who is coming forth. So you show the beetle, but you don't mean beetle, so you're not worshiping a beetle. You're using the beetle as the symbol of the idea of creation.
Okay.
This is another example. Here's a man with a dog's head. You're not worshiping the animal, the dog, but that dog, the jackal, according to Schwaller de Lubitz and others who studied this, is the symbol he is used as a symbol associated with the preparation of the dead, in this case, embalming. His name is Anpu, or some people, the Greeks call him Anubis. That dog is the symbol, is used as a symbol because he can dig up dead meat and eat it before it putrefies and is of no value, so that he makes fine distinctions. He can discriminate between what is life-giving and which is life-taking. And so they say, well, why not use him as a symbol for judgment, for making fine judgment? So you see him here, but you will also see him at handling the scales of justice, where the heart of the deceased is weighed against the feather of truth. So that is a symbolic thought, not to be taken literally. But most people who try to study Kemetic religion tend to try to take it literally, and they will make a mistake every time.
So aren't Christians sometimes referred to as the sheep and the shepherd?
Sheep and the shepherd, right? In Christianity, and you don't expect that people are actually calling people animals,
right?
But they are manifesting sheep-like qualities, you know. And the shepherd is acting in relationship to people the way the shepherd acts in relationship to sheep.
Okay.
Okay, the last, not the last, but the ninth master key. Science generated religion, philosophy, and general culture. In other words, it's really important in looking at ancient Kemet to know that the basis of the culture was totally scientific. In other words, painful observations, tireless observations over literally thousands of years produced insights into how nature works. And it's nature's pattern that reflects a divine will.